The sun sank low over the vast plains, painting the sky in molten oranges and deep crimson. Jackson wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart heavy with the memory of his late wife. His ranch, once alive with laughter and warmth, now echoed only with silence. The wind whispered through the tall grass like voices lost to time, pressing the weight of solitude against him. Every step across the dry earth felt heavier than the last, each creaking fencepost a reminder that he was utterly alone. As he trudged back toward the cabin, two massive figures emerged along the dusty trail. Their silhouettes were almost mythical, towering over the horizon. Hunger and exhaustion clung to them, yet their eyes glimmered with fierce determination. Fear and curiosity gripped Jackson simultaneously, but compassion won. He knew he couldn't turn them away, even if danger lurked. Something inside him told him this encounter was more than chance, it could change everything. Inside the cabin, Jackson hurried to prepare a tray of bread, salted meat, and water. The sisters watched cautiously, their enormous frames filling the doorway. Their language was foreign, melodic and strong, yet their eyes pleaded for trust. Jackson smiled nervously, gesturing for them to eat. A tense silence stretched until the first bite broke through, signaling the fragile beginning of understanding. They devoured the food with surprising gentleness. Jackson watched each movement, the way their shoulders relaxed, the subtle nods of gratitude. Memories of his late wife surged unbidden, mingling with warmth and sorrow. Perhaps fate had brought these strangers to him, not by accident, but as a test of heart. Perhaps he was no longer alone, not entirely. After the meal, he offered blankets and water. The taller sister's eyes softened, almost regal, acknowledging his gesture. Jackson's pulse quickened with a mixture of fear and hope. Tales of Apache warriors, fierce and unrelenting, ran through his mind. Could he have invited danger unknowingly? Yet their presence felt protective rather than threatening, an unspoken bond bridging worlds. Night fell, and the sisters slept near the fire, their massive forms surprisingly human as they curled. Jackson sat outside, staring at the stars, wrestling with unease. The plains seemed alive with whispers, echoes of battles he had never fought. Despite tension, a spark of hope flickered. Perhaps kindness could forge bridges even where fear seemed insurmountable. Morning arrived quietly, spilling soft light across the wheat fields. Jackson rose to find the sisters gone, leaving behind a carved wooden feather where their blankets had been. His chest tightened with a mix of loss and pride. He whispered a silent prayer for their safety, unaware that his simple act of charity had already set events in motion that would engulf his ranch in ways he could never imagine. The day passed in a blur of chores and tension. Jackson fed the livestock, repaired fences, and swept the porch, but every shadow, every whisper of wind, felt like a warning. The plains, once empty, now carried an unseen weight. Little did he know, those he had helped were already summoning hundreds of warriors in gratitude, a storm forming silently on the horizon. By late afternoon, Jackson felt the stillness pressing down. Every distant sound, the crow of a bird, rustling grass, felt magnified, urgent, as though signaling the approach of something unstoppable. Anxiety gnawed at him, yet he tried to focus on routine, convincing himself all was normal. But deep down, he sensed a change, an invisible tide about to sweep across his life. As the sun dipped low, the horizon seemed to ripple with movement. Jackson froze, squinting at the distance. Dust rose in thin, wavering plumes, like smoke from a hidden fire. His heart pounded, instinct told him that the quiet plains he thought he knew were no longer safe. The sisters' disappearance had not been an end, it was a signal, a prelude to a far greater event he could not yet fathom. He tried to steady his breathing, gripping a fencepost for support. Memories of past loneliness clashed with a sudden, wild curiosity. Who were these sisters truly? And what force were they about to unleash upon his quiet life? Questions swirled like the wind, leaving him on edge. Jackson realized he was on the verge of a turning point, the outcome entirely unknown. Shadows stretched across the cabin walls, elongated by the fading sunlight. He lit a lantern, its warm glow battling the encroaching dusk. Every sound, the creak of the cabin, the distant call of a hawk, felt amplified, threaded with suspense. Jackson sensed he was no longer alone, even if no one was visible. The plains had eyes now, silent but watchful. By evening, Jackson prepared for the unexpected. He armed himself, his hands trembling slightly, heart racing. The wind seemed to whisper warnings in a language only he could feel. Hope and fear mingled, fear for what was coming, hope for the unexpected kindness he had already witnessed. The night promised uncertainty, and Jackson was caught between dread and anticipation. Finally, the first signs appeared, a shimmer of movement on the horizon. Jackson's eyes widened as he recognized the unmistakable outline of enormous figures riding toward him. Dust clouds rose behind them, glowing golden in the last rays of sunlight. The sisters were returning, but not alone. Jackson's pulse surged, every nerve alive. The calm of the plains was over, a storm of loyalty, gratitude, and unimaginable power was about to arrive. Dawn broke with a golden haze over the plains, but Jackson's heart raced with a mix of dread and anticipation. The first shapes appeared on the horizon, hundreds of figures on horseback, their feathers and paint glinting in the rising sun. 700 warriors, massive and imposing, formed a living wall of power, surrounding his ranch. Fear clawed at him, yet before panic could take hold, two giant sisters emerged from the ranks, striding confidently toward him. The sisters raised their hands, and the immense army halted. Jackson's eyes widened, disbelief mingling with awe. This was not an attack, it was an army of gratitude. The leader of the warriors, a tall man with piercing eyes, stepped forward and bowed. Jackson realized his small act of kindness had ignited loyalty so fierce it spanned hundreds of warriors. His heart pounded with a mixture of relief and wonder. The sisters spoke, their broken English carrying weight and authority. They explained that their people had watched his generosity and decided that anyone capable of such compassion deserved unwavering loyalty. Jackson listened, almost breathless, as the army pledged their protection. The fear that had gripped him melted, replaced with joy, awe, and a sense of belonging he had not felt in years. Over the next days, the warriors helped fortify the ranch, repair fences, and even plant new crops. The sisters stayed close, their towering presence both protective and comforting. Jackson learned their language, shared meals, and laughed for the first time in years. The ranch, once a lonely outpost, transformed into a lively haven filled with trust, respect, and camaraderie. Evenings were spent around blazing fires, stories shared, and the sound of laughter echoing across the plains. Jackson marveled at the unexpected turn of his life. The loneliness that had once suffocated him was gone, replaced by a family forged not by blood, but by respect and gratitude. He realized that compassion had unlocked a bond stronger than any he had known. Months passed, and the ranch became a sanctuary. Travelers spoke in awe of the giant sisters and the loyal warriors who protected the land. Jackson's life overflowed with warmth, connection, and purpose. Children played, livestock roamed freely, and the fields bloomed under careful hands. The plains, once empty and lonely, now pulsed with life. One golden evening, Jackson stood by the fire with the sisters and some warriors. The sky was ablaze with colors, the horizon stretching endlessly. Jackson felt his late wife's presence in the gentle wind, no longer a weight of sorrow but a reminder that life's rewards often come in unexpected forms. The sisters smiled down at him, guardians and friends, and Jackson knew he was finally home. The warriors, once distant figures of awe, now mingled freely around the ranch, their loyalty unwavering. Jackson realized that fear, loneliness, and doubt were temporary. What remained eternal were the bonds forged through compassion and courage. Every act of kindness had multiplied into a wave that now swept across his life with unstoppable force. Even the harshest winds and most desolate storms seemed powerless against the fortress of friendship and respect he now commanded. The sisters, towering yet gentle, remained a constant reminder that strength and kindness were inseparable. Jackson's heart, once closed and heavy, now embraced the world with open arms, ready to face whatever came next. Jackson walked the plains one evening, the warm glow of the setting sun casting long shadows. He felt a profound peace, knowing that his life, once solitary, now overflowed with trust, laughter, and protection. The memory of fear lingered only as a distant echo, replaced by the vibrant pulse of a life fully alive. The sisters stood beside him, their giant forms silhouetted against the sun. Jackson smiled, understanding that life's miracles often arrive quietly, through simple acts of generosity. The plains, once empty, now told stories of loyalty, courage, and the power of human connection. His heart had finally found a place to belong. In the end, Jackson realized that the smallest act, a shared meal, a gesture of kindness, could ripple into a wave far greater than one could imagine. He had been rewarded with not just protection, but a family, friendship, and a sense of purpose that transformed his lonely ranch into a thriving, joyful home. The wind whispered through the fields, carrying laughter, gratitude, and the soft hum of life renewed. Jackson watched the horizon, the sisters beside him, the warriors in the distance, and felt a profound truth: kindness always returns, often in ways larger and more beautiful than the heart can hold. The ranch stood alive, vibrant, and secure. Jackson, once a lonely man haunted by the past, now smiled at the future with hope and certainty. The plains were no longer silent, they sang with life, loyalty, and joy. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jackson knew he was finally exactly where he was meant to be.